video, let's see how we can integrate ChatGPT codex model into Microsoft Teams, AzureFunction, and PowerAutomate. We'll be building an AI-powered ChatGPT app for non-technical managers to query Azure SQL with natural language in Microsoft Teams. We will explore the process of building an AI-powered ChatGPT app that can be integrated with Microsoft Teams channel to provide a user-friendly interface for querying the data from Azure SQL. The app uses NLP techniques via Open AI Chat GPT codex completion API, that is code Davinci 002 model, to convert the user's question into a SQL query and then sends the query to Azure SQL for execution. The app then receives the queried data and display it back to the user with Microsoft Teams. Let's consider we have a table called sales in Azure SQL. From the sales table, let's see how user can get data based on the NLP input from Teams chat. Go to the Teams channel. Let's get sum of sales grouped by year from the sales table. Please enter the text in plain English and press enter. This will in turn send the message to the PowerAutomate and it will trigger the Azure function via the HTTP triggered action. Azure function will query the message and process it using ChatGPT code completion API, code Davinci 002 model. Via the code completion API determines the intent and entities in the query using the user's input based on the algorithm and generates a SQL query based on the intent and entities. The Python then transmits the ChatGPT generated SQL query to Azure SQL and retrieve the response data, and it will send the response back to the PowerAutomate. So once the response is received, PowerAutomate formats the results and reply them back to the user in Microsoft Teams chat via the reply to message action. Now we can see that PowerAutomate has formatted the message and sends the reply back over here. We get the sum of sales grouped by year. Let's quickly make another conversation to get all the sales data from the sales table. Type it out to get all sales data and press enter. Let's wait for the results to be generated. Over here you can see the Azure function via the code completion API generates the SQL query based on the user's input and gets the data from the Azure SQL. Let's see how this implementation has been done. Let's see the high-level architecture overview and the process steps. Let's see the sequence of high-level architecture process of this app. Whenever the user pings the message in the Microsoft Teams to get the data from the Azure SQL, PowerAutomate flow will get triggered and will get the user's message and it will send the user's message to the Azure function via HTTP trigger. In the Azure function, we have written the logic to get the user's message and convert it to SQL query using the ChatGPT completion API. The ChatGPT completion API will accept the data frame of the Azure SQL and the prompt that has been sent to Azure function via the PowerAutomate. The prompt is the message from the user. With the help of those parameters, the ChatGPT completion API will create a SQL query based on the intent of the prompts. So once the SQL query is created by the ChatGPT, we'll use the Python Azure function and we'll query the data from the Azure SQL and we'll send the result back to the PowerAutomate. PowerAutomate will process the response that has been sent via Azure function and it will format the data and it will send the data back to the user in the same chat. This is the flow we have created. So whenever a message has been received in the user channel, we grab that message and we initialize the variable to save the message in the variable, and we created a HTTP triggered action to call the Azure function and get the response. So once the response has been sent back by the Azure function, we created a action called create HTML table just to format the response to plain HTML and we reply to the user in the same with the same message. In Azure function, we use the completion API, ChatGPT 3 code completion API to form the SQL query based on the user's message. So the code completion API needs these parameters in order to convert the user's message to a SQL query. The first parameter is the model. For the model, we'll be using the latest code Davinci 002 model. So this model is a codex model that will be used for converting the natural language to a code. The next parameter is the prompt. Prompt is we need to instruct the API to inform what it needs to be done. So in this case, we need to pass the Azure SQL table data frame and user message to provide a context that helps the model figure out the best possible completion. The next parameter is tokens. This is the completion API that has been written in the Azure function Python in order to get the response from the message and convert it to a Azure SQL query. So the main parameters are model, prompt, temperature, and tokens. So model, we are using the code Davinci model in order to complete the natural language to the code to form a SQL query. Prompt is like the input that we need to pass to the API in order to perform what it needs to be done. For this case, we'll be using the data frame of the Azure SQL table and the user message. Next parameter is temperature. So with temperature, we can control the randomness and creativity of the model's prediction. In case of clear, correct answer, we need to lean towards the value 0. So in order to be creative or more in random answers, we need to use the value 0.9 for more creative answers. So the temperature value ranges from 0 to 0.9. Next important parameter is tokens. So when a prompt is sent to GPT, it's broken down into words or so-called tokens. Tokens are numeric representations of words or more often parts of words. Numbers are used for tokens rather than words or sentences because they can be processed efficiently. It is also important to understand because tokens are what OpenAI uses as basis for usage fees. Refer the OpenAI token limit documentation to get more details on the tokens and its limits. AI-powered ChatGPT app for non-technical managers to query Azure SQL with NLP in Microsoft Teams has a wide range of potential use cases across various industries. Here are some of the potential use cases. Let's see. We can use this app in sales analytics, marketing campaign analytics, financial analysis, HR resource analytics, and operational management. Please go through the document and let me know in case of any issues. Thanks for watching this video. Let's catch up in another series. Thank you.